The NFL playoffs are here, and I think the Green Bay Packers can take advantage of a rusty Jalen Hurts. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Friday by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's episode, we are going to go game by game through the wild card slate, tell you what we like most from the betting lines in these matchups. We are going to talk Buffalo against Denver, talk about the Rams against the Vikings, but we'll start with the biggest game of the weekend, at least in my opinion, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles against the Green Bay Packers. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Ross, I think that Jalen Hurts could be a little rusty in this game.
I'm with you, man. And the Green Bay Packers defense should be able to take advantage.
They possibly could, but on the other side, we'll look at the Eagles defense. Will they adjust what they do to attack the Packers? Crossover Thursday, Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles talked about just that.
Do you think Philadelphia needs to change what they normally do?
It's not that I think they need to. I'm wondering if they would be willing to, because what we saw Minnesota do is, and they're the heaviest zone coverage team in the NFL this year, Minnesota. They played man on I think in the first half, 60% of dropbacks. And I know that Philadelphia is not a true man coverage team. The Vic Fangio defense can often feel like man coverage. It can kind of look like man coverage at times because of the man match nature of what they're trying to accomplish. But they're not a true man coverage team. They play man coverage kind of a mid. I think 15th was the way Field Vision interpreted it. Depends on how you want to define some of these things. But so I do wonder, I look at Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay and Cooper Jean and go, if they want to, they probably can play more man coverage against Green Bay than they've seen, or than the Packers have seen on tape.
Listen, I personally think that you go into the playoffs, and yes, you could adjust what you do to match up against the other team. That's perfectly fine. But I think the Philadelphia Eagles are just a better football team than the Green Bay Packers ultimately. So if the Eagles go out there and go away from the zone-heavy system that they run typically, and they try to do something different to attack the Green Bay Packers and play more man coverage, I think you're setting yourself up there for a mistake. You know what I mean? You're asking your players to do something they didn't get comfortable doing throughout the year.
Yeah, you don't go into the playoffs and say, you know what, we're going to do that thing that we didn't do all season. That's not the time to do that. So no, I'm with you, buddy. I don't expect Philadelphia to change anything about what it is that they do. They've run man coverage 25.8% of the time so far this season. Zone coverage 68.4% of the time, which is actually, by the way, middle of the pack in the NFL. So not any reason to really go away from what it is that you do. I think there's a lot that's made of making adjustments and trying to do the things that take away what the opposing team does. For the most part, you're just trying to do what it is that you do and do it better than the other team does what they do.
100%. Now, I will tell you this, Ross, in this game right now, 4.5 is the line. The Green Bay Packers are getting 4.5 points. I love that for Sunday. I think that the other side of the ball is really my reason why. Jalen Hurts hasn't played in a couple of weeks. He's a rhythm quarterback who can be a little bit streaky. You get a rusty performance from Jalen Hurts with the safeties of the Green Bay Packers and Xavier McKinney and Javon Bullard, the rookie, and then Evan Williams. Hopefully he's healthy and ready to go in this game. It looks like he will be. I think the safeties have the ability to create some turnovers on a rusty Jalen Hurts, and that makes things close. I think the Eagles win the game, but I'll take the Green Bay Packers plus 4.5.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think this is a close game. It's going to be one of the better games. I agree with you that this is probably the best game of the weekend in terms of competition on both sides of the football, right?
Right.
I kind of like Jalen Hurts right now over at FanDuel, 212.5 is the over-under for his passing yards. I could see the Eagles go to a run-heavy approach in this game, which is not out of their, outside of their wheelhouse at all.
Yeah.
And therefore, maybe the under on Jalen Hurts ends up hitting, especially with him just now coming back from injury. As he tries to come back from injury. And look, I'm just glad we don't have to watch Tanner McKee or Kenny Pickett in this matchup. I'll take Jalen Hurts all day.
You're not wrong about that. Now, do want to move to the next biggest matchup of the weekend. In my opinion, me and Michelle disagreed about this on yesterday's show, but I love the Steelers and Ravens matchup on Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pittsburgh right now, 9.5-point underdogs. And look, I know that the Ravens won 34-17 in the last matchup, but there's one key difference here, and that's George Pickens back with the Steelers, and our crossover third between Locked On Steelers and Locked On Ravens talked about that.
One of the big concern points for the Ravens defense, people are calling them the weak link. I think that's a little harsh, but if there is a weak link, it probably would be Brandon Stevens. He's been a guy that was awesome for them last season. He was one of their best corners last year. He shut down Jamar Chase single-handedly in both those Bengals games last year. But this year it's been a struggle. One of the things that really has been Brandon Stevens' downfall is he does not turn his head for the ball. He does not know how to locate. He does not know when to get his head around. There was no George Pickens in the game last time these two teams played. Calvin Austin made a couple of really big catches. You have to worry about a guy like Pat Freiermuth. But then I think the next question for Pittsburgh is who else steps up? Is Mike Williams going to give you something? Is Van Jefferson? I mean, who is it going to be in the Steelers pass offense besides George Pickens, besides Calvin Austin, and besides Pat Freiermuth? Because Baltimore is going to do their best to take away at least two of those options.
You talk about other pieces stepping up. That's why I like Pittsburgh plus 9.5 so much in this game. The odds of there being a second blowout between Baltimore and Pittsburgh in 1 year, I just don't buy that. I think that the Baltimore Ravens ultimately win the game, but I think Pittsburgh stays close. And my thing is, who's going to step up? I think it's Najee Harris and it's Jalen Warren. And not only does Pittsburgh have their weapon back, but now Zay Flowers is out for this game, reducing the weaponry that the Ravens have. I think it creates a perfect situation for the Steelers to play this one close.
Yeah, and when it comes down to that Baltimore defense, we're talking about the team that surrendered the third most passing plays of more than 20 yards so far this season.
Big
58
plays.
of those, right behind the Lions at 62, a surprising team to be up there. And then the Jaguars at 71. Neither of us are surprised by that, Tyler. But when it comes down to George Pickens, he's recorded the second most receiving yards on passes that travel 20-plus yards through the air. So this is a prime matchup for him, and especially with, look, your team can be very strong in a lot of areas, but you're always going to have a weak link, as Kevin mentioned. And if that weak link ends up matching up with George Pickens, expect George Pickens to try to take the top off. I like the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one to cover. The Baltimore Ravens equalizer, though, is playoff Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Something to watch in this matchup, because otherwise they should run away with it.
The playoffs are where Lamar Jackson is going to frame the rest of his career. It's time now. Let's see what happens with the run game and everything. But Zay Flowers, definitely something to watch, how Baltimore can overcome that. He's a monster playmaker for him. But with that being said, a ton of great games on this slate. We're breaking them all down. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Are you tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you got one form or 20. TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters, like the playoffs. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by pros. If you're ready for a stress-free tax experience and the most money back guaranteed, head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can enjoy your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash. With daily fantasy player projections with Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, and you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast. This week, I'm looking at probably Josh Allen more than 230 passing yards, Saquon Barkley more than 1 touchdown. It's so easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Ross, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, getting you guys ready to go for this big-time, remember they call it Super Wild Card Weekend?
Super Wild Card Weekend, because they added 2 whole games.
It's super now, folks. But either way, we talked about the Packers-Eagles game, like the Packers plus 4.5, talked about the Steelers-Ravens game. We both like the Steelers plus 9.5 in this one. Now I move to what I think is the next most interesting game on the slate, and it's the Minnesota Vikings traveling to the Los Angeles Rams. Before we get started with the game, Ross, I did just want to send our sentiments out to the folks dealing with the wildfires in the Southern California area. Obviously, super devastating situation, and we just hope that, everybody stays safe and does the best you can. I know, for some people, it's not necessarily an option to just stay safe if they choose, but, we're sending our well wishes out to everybody in affected by the fires there in California. But with that being said, the NFL stops for no man, and it looks like this game will be played in Los Angeles, and I'm a sucker for it, Ross. I've been on the train for weeks now. I like the Los Angeles Rams in this game, plus 1.5. There's a big-time reason why I like them, but I'm not the only person that has some optimism for the Rams. Our guys from Locked On Rams talked about why they think the Rams have a good chance to win.
I think there are some reasons for optimism. Number one, you've played them. Number one, you beat them. Number three, it's at SoFi Stadium. Minnesota will have fans there, but they're not Buffalo fans. They're not Green Bay fans, Philadelphia fans, Dallas fans, Raider fans. There may be people, there may be some numbers. They're nice upper Midwestern folks who, they came through the first time and they were about as pleasant people as you're going to run into at SoFi Stadium. So I don't think it's going to be a particularly raucous environment as far as the opposing crowd goes. And then I think the biggest part of all is the Sam Darnold factor. That Sam Darnold has had a terrific, and look, and I'll back up a little bit. I'm a Sam Darnold fan. He didn't scare me. He didn't. He's not one. Justin Jefferson scares me. Jordan Addison can have a moment. TJ Hawkinson did not play last time. He's going to play. There's a lot of stuff there, but this is a league that's predicated on head coaches and quarterbacks, and I think Kevin O'Connell's a really good head coach. But I'll just tell you right now, Sam Darnold really doesn't scare me, and that's the part that gives me the most confidence at all, especially after seeing the way he struggled in Detroit.
My guy, Travis Rogers, telling Vikings fans, you ain't that guy.
You ain't that guy, pal. You Midwestern nice people. That was incredible.
Yeah, great stuff there from my guy, Travis Rogers. But look, Ross, despite all that, at the end of the day, I agree. It's about quarterbacks. It's about head coaches. I trust Matthew Stafford more. I know that Kevin O'Connell is a great coach, but he came from Sean McVay. So I'm going to trust Sean McVay. I'm going to trust Matthew Stafford. I'm going to trust the home field advantage, and I am going to trust that the Vikings have bad mojo right now. So give me the Rams at home plus 1.5.
I'm taking the Rams money line, baby. I'm all about the Rams in this matchup. And I'll tell you what, like sometimes there's All right, look, Tyler, you're a smart guy. You know the difference between
Thanks.
You know the difference between correlation and causation, right?
Yes.
This might be a little bit more correlation than causation, but the last time that the Los Angeles Rams beat the Minnesota Vikings earlier this season, you know who the Minnesota Vikings lost to the week before? It was the Detroit Lions. Yeah. And so now they just got punched in the mouth big time by the Detroit Lions. And so some might say, oh, the Minnesota Vikings are going to be angry, but that's that Midwestern attitude. Are they going to be angry?
They're too nice to be angry.
They're too nice. And so I think the Rams can sneak in and do it again. I don't think the Rams proceed much further than the super wild card weekend. But I like the Rams in this situation. I think they're catching the Minnesota Vikings at the right time. I think that's the big thing for me.
I agree with you. I think the Vikings were on ice all season with is Sam Darnold for real? Can we keep this up? Right. Can we? And they just kept it going. But now that they take one hit, I don't know if they can get back on track after taking that shot. So give me the Rams as well. I will tell you though, Ross, this is the one I'm least confident about. I could see Minnesota just getting right back to their bustle ways and just rolling, 30-7 or something like that. Right. But
Brian
for right
Flores
now,
is mad. His defense is hunting, all that. I'm with you.
Yeah, it could have. I'm the least confident in this one in the confidence poll. But the next game I feel pretty confident in, and it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Washington Commanders. And in this one, finally, I'm off the underdogs, Ross. Give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers -3 in this matchup. And, we'll look at, can the Commanders get the upset? I don't know, but this is what they got to do, according to David Harrison from Locked On Commanders.
Number one thing you got to do is stop the buck, which, of course, is stop the Bucky. You got to – I don't know if you can stop Bucky Irving, but you just got to hope to contain him. Whatever it is, you got to bring him down. You mentioned yards after contact. Frankie Luvu told me on Wednesday in the locker room, look, we know we got to get to him. We know we got to get to our fits. But not only that, we got to tackle this dude, because if the first guy can't make him miss, there's a good chance the second guy's not going to have a chance. Or the first guy can't bring him down, rather. There's a chance that the second guy is not going to have the opportunity. Number two, let Jaden loose. Look, as athletic as Jaden is, as impressive as he has been, there have been times, and I'm not necessarily saying that the Commanders have restricted him, but there have been times where Jaden seems to not necessarily want to steer into his athleticism earlier in the game. He kind of waits until it's a little bit later in the game, and sometimes that puts stress on both sides of the ball because there's not a lot of points being scored. So if I'm telling Jaden, saying, look, dude, this is the postseason. This is the time to let it all hang out. If you're not finding your reads early, go ahead and you lean on that athleticism like you need to.
So a couple of things. I agree Jaden Daniels should absolutely rest on his athleticism. Now is not the time to worry about taking hits and blah, blah. No, you need to go win the game. But Michelle was on the show yesterday, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, and she went on a tirade about rookie quarterbacks on the road in the playoffs and how unsuccessful they are. Now, she was talking about Bo Nix, but as I pointed out, you could apply that to Jaden Daniels as well. The Commanders have had a hard time recently getting off the fast starts. And I think that if you let Baker Mayfield and that offense get some mojo, that this game could be a game where I think the Buccaneers win by 10 or so. I trust Baker Mayfield a lot more. And the offensive line of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is just so good. Give me the Bucs in this one, -3.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Commanders in this one, man. I think that I really am, and maybe there's a little bit of NFC South bias. Like, I'll take my medicine afterwards if I need to. I've got no problem with that. But like Washington, number 28 in the NFL in terms of yards after contact per attempt allowed, versus Tampa, number 1 in yards after contact gained over on the offensive side. So it's strength versus strength when it comes to these two teams. So I absolutely look at that as a big thing. But for me, who's the dynamic playmaker that can take this game over? That's Jaden Daniels for me. And I think if you can run the ball successfully, that's great. But if you can win through the air, you're going to come out on top. And that's what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have had trouble stopping, is success through the air. So Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, those are the guys that I'm watching in this matchup to potentially settle this one.
The one thing that does worry me is Marshawn Lattimore is going to play in this game. And Mike Evans against Marshawn Lattimore, as you know very well, Ross,
that's an ejection
down there in the frigid 40-degree weather in the South there. You know very well that that could be a contentious matchup. And Marshawn Lattimore has had major success against Mike Evans, which I think puts the emphasis on what I think the game breakers are, and that's Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan, the rookie playmaker for the Buccaneers offense. That's where Jaden Daniels or the other rookies on offense for Tampa Bay, who makes the bigger impact in the game, that might make the difference here. But 2 games left, maybe not as good of games, but one of them at least I think is going to be a great game, even if I've changed my mind on who I think is going to cover. So we'll talk about that. Go to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Speaking of all these bets and all these lines, from the big upsets or the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, especially right now, because new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, player props, whatever you want, and so much more. I love FanDuel. FanDuel is by far the best app I've ever seen in the marketplace, the most visually stunning as well. And I can't wait to take all of these picks that we're talking about right here and go to FanDuel and make it happen. And you can do the same if you visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started again with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Ross, we're going to cap off today's super wild card preview edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Talked Philly, Eagles, talked Steelers, Ravens, Rams, Vikings, Commanders, Buccaneers. Now I got to dive into what I think is the most underrated game of the weekend.
Ooh.
And it's the Buffalo Bills hosting the Denver Broncos. Look, I know that this matchup doesn't look great on paper. It's -8.5. The Bills are favored over the Broncos, and I understand why. Rookie quarterback on the road. Bills are one of the best teams in the league. Weather, tough environment. I get all that, but I'm excited to watch this game because the Broncos have been a fun team all year long. Bo Nix gets hot. I think this is a game where Buffalo can go up early, and then the Broncos can kind of claw their way back in as Buffalo gets bored. But if the Broncos are going to pull an upset, there is one critical thing that must happen in the game, according to Sayer Benninger of Locked On Broncos.
Well, I always think it's so easy to say, well, you got to win the turnover battle. You got to convert on third downs. You got to do this, that, and the other. So let's get super specific here, all right? I think you're going to need 2 interceptions in this game in order to win. Now, again, we talked about it before. Josh Allen, fewest interceptions we've seen of his career, lowest interception percent, fewest giveaways of any team in the NFL. If you're the Denver Broncos, you want to go on the road and upset the Buffalo Bills in the postseason, I think you're going to need 2 picks in this game at least in order to give your offense those extra possessions and turn the tide momentum-wise to get this win. So keep Marvin Mims hot, manage the game well if you're Sean Payton, and then number 3, get at least 2 interceptions. And I think then the Broncos could book their trip to Kansas City for the second round of the playoffs.
Couple of things. Sayer's on it. They're going to need some turnovers to turn the tide. But Buffalo has struggled with underneath quick throws and with tackling and yards after catch and things like that. And a guy like Marvin Mims could definitely take advantage. Cortland Sutton can make physical catches underneath in tight spaces. So I think the Broncos come back in this game and make it close. Man, I'll tell you, I'm right on the line. I've been pushing the Broncos for a little bit, but there's just no way, right? There's just no way, right? I got to go with the Bills -8.5. I think the Broncos could lose by 10, but make it close and make it a fun game.
Yeah, I think this is the game with the most upset potential, but it doesn't necessarily mean
it would be
that
the most shocking,
I think, to happen. Yeah. And I think you look at you've got a head coach like Sean Payton in Denver, who's always alive. You have a defensive coordinator like Vance Joseph, one of the best in the NFL. He's already he's continuing to get head coaching looks and all those other things. I think that you have the right leadership, the right play callers, all those other things. I think the Broncos though might be here a year too early. I think that's all that it is. Like a loss for the Denver Broncos, no Denver fan should feel bad about losing to the number 2 seed Buffalo Bills in this matchup. But Yeah, but like if there's a situation here to where amongst these games, these 6 games, that there's the most upset potential, most shocking upset potential, I do think that it's this one up against the from the Denver Broncos up against the Buffalo Bills. I'll add real quick, fewest turnovers in the league when it comes to when it comes to the Buffalo Bills, only 2 fumbles as giveaways as well. So not only has Josh Allen taken care of the ball, that entire offense is taking care of the ball really, really well.
Yeah, they've been locked in. I'm thinking about it, looking, yes, the Steelers and Ravens have a bigger line, like plus 9 or 9.5 points is bigger than 8.5. So technically the Steelers. But would anybody truly be outright shocked if the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens? Like, that doesn't seem as shocking as rookie Bo Nix going into Buffalo and knocking off this Buffalo team. So I don't care about the lines in that scenario. I know which one is the bigger shocking upset. But we move to what I will say is the least interesting game. It's a playoff game. So I'm hype and I can't wait and I'm going to be ready to watch it. But at the end of the day, Chargers and Texans really is the runt of the litter here. But I think it could be a very interesting game. Now, in this one, I like Texans 2.5 at home. I don't think the Chargers are a good enough team to be laying points on the road. But what I really like in this game, even more than that, is the under 42.5. The Texans offense has been off all year long. The Chargers offense isn't fantastic by any means, but I lean Texans in this one at home. The one thing I will say is the Texans have not played smart football all year long. They haven't been as good as their record, and that's something that my guy John Hickman from Locked On Texans is worried about as well.
Even with me saying playing smart and looking at the penalties and everything, playing smart for the Houston Texans also means for the offensive line, they have to play smart and communicate with the twists and stunts and the blitz that every team they played all year have known they cannot handle since week 2 against the Chicago Bears. So they gotta play smart. And that's been hurting this Houston Texans offense all year. I'm going to go as far to say I think the amount of hits that CJ has taken this year because of the inadequate protection up front has led to his mechanics being thrown off, and that's where we've seen his biggest drop-off. Number 2 for me, create turnovers. I just told you guys about Kalen Bullock. We know about Derek Stingley. Kamari Lassiter has gotten in on the party. They got to be able to create the turnovers to give your offense favorable field position. This is not an offense that I absolutely trust right now.
I don't trust the Texans offense, defense, anything right now. If I'm honest with you, I just don't think that either of these teams is great. And you give me some points at home. I'll tell you though, Ross, one thing that's standing in my mind here, you can tell I'm wishy-washy on this game. It's pretty obvious, but Rashawn Slater is going to play in this game, starting left tackle for the Los Angeles Chargers. The best part about the Texans is their defensive line and their edge rushers. And when you have Joe Alt at right tackle and then Rashawn Slater at left tackle, I changed my mind. Give me Chargers minus 2.5. The Texans are bums. No way. No way.
Yeah, that's huge because, I mean, you got to look at the Texans from the pass rush standpoint. Guys like Will Anderson, guys like Danielle Hunter, 2 of the top edge rushers in pressures in the NFL, the top edge rushing tandem in terms of total pressures in the NFL. So having a guy like Rashawn Slater back, having that offensive line closer to full health, I think is massive for Justin Herbert and for them. I also think, like, look, I have to acknowledge the Harbaugh of it all, right? Like, when you look at these,
the Harbaugh of it all,
when you look at these playoff matchups, I oftentimes look at what's the quarterback, what's the coach on each side of the ball. And right now I just trust Herbert and Harbaugh more than I trust Ryans and Stroud.
Yeah, you're 100. It's the same philosophy that we applied to the Los Angeles Rams. You know, it's the quarterback and the coach duo that just seems more reliable. I will say though, like the Rams practice circumstances and what some of their families might be going through because of the fires, like that could absolutely play a factor in this game. They may have to move the game still. They're saying they're not, but we'll see. Like, I think that there's a chance that by Monday night when that game gets played, that the line is different because of how people are calculating that the circumstances could impact the Rams.
That's a good point, because I think the circumstances impact the Chargers too. They might not be playing in Los Angeles, but you still have the families there, right? So you still have the your mind could be somewhere else type of a situation, which is completely understandable. Like, these guys are all human, everything. So that's a really good point, because that could end up playing a factor in this game. Or it's that whole situation of playing for something bigger than the playoff game, and sometimes that can be a motivating factor.
Yeah, 100% can. And you know that, when bad circumstances happen, sometimes, a lot of the time, it tends to band people together. That's, trauma forges relationships sometimes, for better or for worse. So, but with that being said, no trauma has forged this relationship, Ross. Just winning bets.
I'm glad to hear that.
But, with that being said, though, that is going to do it for us today. Wild card weekend is here. The playoffs are here. I hope you guys enjoy. Good luck with all of your bets and all the wagers that you're making out there. That's going to do it for me, the madman, Tyler Rowland, and my co-host, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.